But yeah, let's get into it. It's 2:32. So welcome everyone. As I pull up my bios here, welcome everyone to the Pro Bono Legal Services for Environmental Justice Communities session. Today we're joined by Hannah Brubach and Seema Kakade. And by way of introduction, um, Hannah is, sorry, Hannah joined the Chesapeake Legal Alliance in January 2019 as a law fellow, co-employed by CLA and the Environmental Action Center. Hannah is now a full-time staff attorney with CLA. Prior to joining CLA, Hannah worked for Maryland Department of the Environment, where she collaborated with the U.S. Climate Alliance, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI, and the Maryland Commission on Climate Change to analyze and develop successful climate policy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Maryland. Prior to MDE, Hannah volunteered with CLA to analyze the legal foundations of citizen complaints and evaluate strategies for states to employ in their Chesapeake Bay TMDL Phase 3 watershed implementation plans. And then for Seema joined the University of Maryland Carey School of Law as an assistant professor and director of the Environmental Law Clinic in July 2017. Professor Kakade has extensive practical experience in implementation, enforcement, and compliance with environmental law. Her substantive expertise and research interests are in the area of air pollution, energy, and climate change. Prior to joining the law school, Professor Kakade served as a federal government attorney with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Office of Civil Enforcement, and the U.S. Department of Energy, Office of General Counsel. At both agencies, Professor Kakade won numerous awards for her work, including several bronze and silver medals for service, and twice received the Administrator's Award for Excellence. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's great to have everybody.
And the first kind of question that I just want to get us going on is a little bit off book, but a little bit of a check-in. How are each of you doing? What are you seeing in the communities and the constituents that you serve in your work? So I'll start with Hannah.
Sure. Things are going well. There was definitely a downturn in requests for assistance right as the pandemic started, as everyone was trying to get their footing and figure out what was next. But especially with the PPP loan confusion and everything that came along with that, we started working more with organizations to help them understand the loans and how they can continue to employ their staff. As well, we have been seeing more of an uptake now with the environmental intakes as well.
Got it.
And I guess one thing to add to that is we've changed our model at CLA to be a little bit more flexible too. So I've been trying to be available after hours or on weekends or things like that to do intakes to make sure that everyone has a chance to reach out to CLA for assistance.
Got it. Thanks. Seema?
So my office has not seen a slowdown at all. We've seen the opposite, tremendous requests for legal help. Really has been that way since I arrived at the clinic 4-ish or so years ago. And I think it's increased in my time at the clinic. We have requests way more than we can handle from what I typically call sort of your bigger green groups who are needing help working on, very large kind of federal issues, many of which are environmental justice focused on a larger scale. We also get requests from organizations, established organizations abroad. We do a lot of legal support work for environmental justice oriented organizations in developing countries. So we do a lot of that work as well. But I do a tremendous amount of work at the local level here in Maryland, across the state, working for groups that are not established as an organization at all, right? That are a group of individuals that might be neighbors, a homeowners association, a group that is thinking about becoming a community group of some sorts, but isn't quite there yet. And so we have requests in a wide variety of areas, and the phones are definitely ringing off the hook, and certainly emails coming in for need of help.
I'm not surprised. So you two, I understand, you know, you've prepared this session to provide, you know, resources and to share what's going on and what communities can do in this time. You know, obviously, even with COVID-19, environmental injustices are still happening, and maybe even more so. So at this time, you know, I give you the floor to go ahead.
Great, thanks. Hannah, do you want to go first or should I?
Sure, I can start. So in case most of you don't know, Chesapeake Legal Alliance is a nonprofit that provides pro bono legal services to you, your organizations, your partners, your community members. We do everything from helping you challenge your permits, helping you write comment letters, analyze policy, just figure out where that water is going in your backyard, to also helping organizations form themselves as 501c3s or environmental bay organization who has an employment issue or wants to ensure they're paying their employees correctly. We can get you an employment attorney. We do some legal services in-house, more of the environmental work, Clean Water Act issues, with our 7 staff attorneys on staff. And then we also send out to our network the more corporate issues, TSCA issues, employment issues, and really anything that environmental organizations need help with. We also have a community legal education program, and this is designed to really help environmental justice communities and communities throughout the watershed who don't understand the legal issues, don't have the time to figure out what's going on. So if I have permission to share my screen, I'll just share a few resources with everyone. I think I do, okay. So I'll just show you our website real quick. If you click on guides and resources, Chesapeake Legal Alliance has a Clean Water Act enforcement webinar that we've put on in the past that you can watch a recording of, as well as view a PowerPoint. We also have a flyer that describes the state structures of government. And it goes through Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia specifically, and how those states are working in the government, what their differences is, when their sessions are, and when you can participate. Another one that's helpful if you're in Maryland is the Groundwater Permit and Spray Field Advocacy Opportunities. And so if you are facing groundwater issues in your community, this is a guide to help you see the different advocacy points. And once you go through the guide, we're happy to help you further in understanding the guide or implementing some of the advocacy suggestions. We also have a lot of work from our partners that I would like to share with everyone that we really rely on often. So first, we often use the EJ screen tool. And if you don't know what this is, we can talk about that a little bit more later if anyone has any questions. As well, another area, and this is kind of fun, is you can search your address on flood factor and see what the chances are of flooding are in your community. So this overlaps a lot with what CPR has looked into in, let me see. I got the tab somewhere. Oh, here it is, it's at the end. Toxic floodwaters in the Chesapeake. And we can look at different flooding that's happening. And so our partners at Center for Progressive Reform have worked a lot on looking at flooding. And so you can look at what your flood factor is and then be able to see the hazards that might be in your community.
In the ways that they need and see fit, especially as
make sure everyone is muted, please. Thank you. And then just a few other resources that I wanted to share with you are, CLA is going to be doing some advocacy coming up as the industrial permits come out. This is a map of Maryland and all of the industrial sites that have stormwater permits that the state is required to comply with. And so you can look, this map is available in a CPR report that I can share with you in the chat box. But all of these are required to comply with this permit, and CLA will be doing some advocacy around the permit, writing comments, and we'd love to work with community members to know what's going on in your communities and how we can include those impacts into our comment letters. So I will stop sharing my screen now. And this is just some of the work that CLA has coming up in the pipeline. We're working right now to comment on a construction stormwater permit. It has to do a little bit with communities, but it's also, you know, it's more in the background where the industrial stormwater permit is going to be directly impacting your communities.
Great. Hannah, anything else, or should I go next?
Yeah, you can go ahead and go, Seema, and then I'm happy to keep answering questions and talking more after.
Great, great. All right, so I will tell folks on the phone a little bit about what my group does. So as Jan Michael described, I'm the director of the Environmental Law Clinic at the University of Maryland Law School. Okay, so some of you may know what we do, others may not. We are a pro bono legal office at the University of Maryland Law School, and students are our staff, okay? So we take legal matters on a pro bono basis for individuals, community groups, and established organizations on environmental matters. And it is a terrific program, in part because it allows for various organizations and community groups to get free legal services. And it also allows the students who are about to go into practice the opportunity to work on real legal matters and work with clients. So that is what our clinical program is. We are a fairly large and established clinical law program. We're a clinic, sort of how you would maybe think of a medical school, where there might be medical students that operate a free legal clinic for medical services. We operate similarly, and we have different practice areas. So the University of Maryland Law School has an immigration practice area, tax practice area, criminal defense, multiple different areas. And so my focus is on environmental cases and environmental matters that come into the clinic. Okay, and so we operate with several students who work on a part-time basis in the clinic during the school year. So the majority of our services are conducted between August and about May, which is the school year at the law school. And the students work on cases and legal matters under my direction. Okay, and so we do a whole variety of matters, all right? When I get inquiries coming in, and as I was just describing, we get a lot of inquiries for help. We tend to focus on which groups really need our assistance, okay? And so I work with Hannah's office, for example. I work with other organizations like the Community Law Center in Baltimore City to see whether the group that is coming to me, right, has the ability to get legal help elsewhere, okay? Because I prioritize those that really cannot get help elsewhere or are struggling to get help elsewhere. That is definitely at the top of my priority list. I also prioritize either matters or individuals or communities that are located in what might be termed an environmental justice area. Okay, Hannah described EJ Screen. There are a lot of other panels as a part of this wonderful symposium that really focus a lot more on mapping and understanding what an environmental justice community is. Okay, we use a lot of mapping tools. We get to know people that are calling us, and we prioritize areas and communities that are in environmental justice oriented communities. So that's another priority matter that I would take, or a priority group that I would take. But in terms of substantive areas, right, Hannah was talking about how her group really focuses on water. We certainly do water issues, but we do a whole gamut. And I take a bit of a different approach in the way we run our clinic, is where we tend to work with a individual group on a whole variety of matters that might be important to that community. Sometimes I get calls from communities or individuals and they're not exactly sure. Is their issue a water issue? Is it a zoning issue? Is it a permit? Or is it multiple different things going on at one time? And part of what we do, okay, we spend a lot of time client counseling with individuals and groups to be able to help understand, right, is this a water issue? Is it a zoning issue? Is it an air permit issue? What kind of issue is it? Or is it not a legal issue at all? Sometimes folks have a lot of issues that they're really needing help on, and it might just not be a legal issue, okay? It might be a financial issue. It might be an issue that is really better for a political representative, for example, that needs a more advocacy approach as opposed to a legal approach. So we work through all those issues, and sometimes that in and of itself, that kind of client counseling and problem solving, can take months, okay? And so we will take on a group that just needs to sort out multiple different issues. And so sometimes those groups are dealing with multiple pollution sources, right? So it's air plus water plus all kinds of things. Sometimes groups, though, are the opposite. They really do know that they've got this particular issue, okay? A big one going on right now, we've got a lot of community groups in the Maryland area that are near areas where there's large infrastructure projects going on, right? Big roads are being expanded or new rail lines are coming in, and it's coming in their neighborhood, and they get notice that they might be able to write written comments about any concerns they have with that infrastructure project, right? They may be able to provide testimony, okay? And so I've got a lot of groups calling me asking for help on how to do that, okay? If there's a large environmental review process going on for that infrastructure project, and that environmental review process allows for public participation through written comment or oral testimony, my clinic and my clinic students will often help groups through that public participation process, okay? So that's an example of sometimes when it's a little bit more pinpointed. Someone goes, I got a notice for participation in a process that's happening, and I could really use help writing comments, or I could really use help with the testimony that I want to give. Okay. Sometimes we have groups that are all over the map on, you know, what their issue is with respect to what level of government, okay, that they're dealing with. We've got groups that come in and the issues that they're facing fall squarely in the executive branch, right, which is agencies that are dealing with environmental issues, Maryland Department of Environment, for example, okay, or something that's going on at their county or city executive branch agency, okay. Then we've got other groups that are not focused on what's going on in an executive branch agency, but is focused on a totally separate group, which might be the state legislature, okay, or the federal legislature, right? They're really looking to see the law or regulations that they're dealing with just are not, there's nothing there, right? Or it doesn't fit. And they're interested in proposing something new, a new law. They want to get engaged in a new bill. And as maybe some folks know here, the Maryland state legislative process is a 90-day period, usually in the winter season. So that can be a really busy time for my clinic too. I get a lot of requests sort of right before the legislative season for folks that are targeting really sort of interest in getting involved in that, that group of government that we focus on, the legislative sector, right? And then the third, right, is the judicial branch. And that's, I think, what most people think of when they think lawyers. They think courtroom, they think a judge, they think hearings, and we certainly do a lot of that work as well, okay? Last year, my clinic had a very large case that was started as a zoning case in one branch of government in sort of the administrative agencies, and went into judicial review and the judicial side, and we went up to the Maryland Court of Special Appeals and had an argument there. And so we definitely work on all three branches of government, okay? And that's a lot to just digest. Sometimes, like I said, we get calls where someone knows exactly where they are headed, right? Where the focus is. And other times it's a mix. It's all over the place. We might be working with a community group on 4 different issues, and there, a couple of them are in one branch of government, a couple of them are in another branch of government. And so we help people sort through a lot of that, okay? The other interesting thing that happens a lot is just sorting out for community groups or individuals, not only which branch of government their particular issue might be slated best for, but also sort of which level, okay? Sometimes we're talking local levels, right? City and county government, okay? My clinic does work, for example, on urban agriculture issues in Baltimore City, right? That is really city oriented, okay? Doesn't necessarily involve other branches of government up the chain nearly as much, right? But sometimes it's not at the city or county level, sometimes it's at the state level, right? And all those 3 branches of government have interaction at the state level as well. And then we also sometimes do work at the federal level, okay? There's a lot of federal activity that's happening. We're near DC, right? Sometimes projects that are happening or permitting that's happening at the state level, right, interacts also with federal government agencies or federal courts if you're in the judicial branch. So there's a lot to sort out, okay? And so a lot of the reason why we take the approach we do, which is much more client counseling focused, at least at the get-go, is because it takes some time to sort through where are the legal issues? Are there legal issues at all, right? And where can we best help? And so that's a lot to take. And so sometimes what my clinic does is we tell people, after we've sorted out what we think are multiple different issues potentially, we only have the resources for this piece. Okay, that's not to say that there's not compounding issues going on, but right now we have the resources to help with this. And so we'll take a slice, right? And we will maybe sign a more formal retainer agreement and engage in legal representation and help on a more narrow piece, right? Or sometimes my group will co-counsel, right? I'll call up Hannah, and if it's a water issue, I'll say, hey, Hannah, can you have someone that can help on a water issue? We'll handle an air issue, or we'll handle the zoning issue, right? And we'll work together with other groups because that increases my resources if I've got other attorneys that I'm co-counseling working with. So I do that with Hannah sometimes. I also do that with private practice lawyers that are interested in doing pro bono cases, maybe once in a while, right? And sometimes that happens. And so for you that are on the phone listening right now, right, you might think to yourself, I'm in need of legal services. You also might be a person that is a lawyer, right, and wants to actually engage in pro bono legal services for environmental justice communities, and you don't know where to go, right? That's terrific for me because you could call me up and maybe try co-counseling with me on a specific case or a matter. And I do that once in a while, okay? And so that provides opportunities for private practice lawyers to engage, right, on issues that are important in the community and really be providing their services to environmental justice communities in a broader way. Same is true for those of you that might be listening that have technical expertise. Okay, you might have an expertise in a mapping area or an engineering area or a water quality or soil science area. You might be retired and looking to help in a pro bono capacity, and your expertise is not legal but more technically oriented, right? I need technical experts all the time in a wide variety of areas, right? I need them in all 3 branches of government, depending on what's coming in my way. Sometimes I need formal experts. Sometimes I just need help reviewing something, right, from a technical standpoint to even know, right, is there a potential legal issue here? And so I also use pro bono technical experts a lot, and I'm always looking for more, okay? So I think there is a space here within my clinic, certainly, and I think with other legal service organizations like Hannah's, to really utilize a wide variety of experts, right? And I think that is really at least my goal from the standpoint of working in the clinic and trying to serve communities across our state and across the Mid-Atlantic DMV area. With a wide variety of legal service options that also include technical expertise, right? That include legislative, executive branch, and judicial know-how and understanding, and just simply talking to people, right? Just simply talking to people and working through issues and trying to identify where we can help if it can't be the entire thing, okay? That is really where my clinic focuses its time. Jan Michael, do you have other questions that you have for us?
Excellent, thank you. Well, I definitely want this session to be kind of that clinic feel. So audience members, attendees, please feel free to either add questions or at a certain point, we can open it up for, you know, just live Q&A. Thank you both for sharing, you know, the services that your offices are providing. And one of my main questions is with, well, Seema, I think you addressed this pretty well when you're describing that there's a spectrum of capacity when it comes to the clients that you see. Some of them really don't know where to start. Others have a very specific, maybe they've worked with other, you know, legal help or other advocacy groups in the community, and they have kind of a plan of moving forward. What, in terms of the capacity of both of your organizations, if what you're, and I'm sure right now, you know, it's kind of triage, you're seeing it all, but what kind of resources would you point community members on the end of the spectrum where they don't have a lot of knowledge, or they just kind of, they need an idea of where to go first? Would you suggest them coming to you first, or would you say, like, yeah, schedule an appointment, but also look into these resources to kind of get an idea? What's the process there?
Yeah. Hannah, do you want to go first?
Sure. So for us, it's usually just please come to us. We have an intake form on our website at chesapeakelegal.org/help. And I can put that in the chat as well. But we will, as Seema was talking about, go through the counseling of what is your issue, what are some resources, and while we're on that call, we can even pull up some of the websites that we go to look at to see what's going on in your community. What can we see from Google Earth, and what can we see is nearby on our different website searches?
Yeah, and I would say similarly with my group, I welcome people just to contact me, okay? Particularly by email. I have emails coming in all the time. So send me an email and we get on the phone with people and try to think about what's the best first step to take. And we also do a more formal intake, depending on where things go. I usually assign a student to give somebody a call back or an email back to at least do an initial call, and we train our students to do that initial intake. And I typically decide to take on larger matters for groups that really sort of know that they need legal help and they, you know, we've got it going. I typically take on larger matters and reevaluate our resources and capacity twice a year. I usually do it once in the summer, and I usually do it in the Christmas, New Year holiday time period. And those are just natural times for the school year with students coming sort of in and out of clinic. I also like to do it twice a year because, you know, I just have found that it is better than once a year. Feels like not quite enough, but twice a year seemingly is a good time to kind of reevaluate where we are at. So those are the two times that I really get an incoming flux of requests, because I think people know that I typically relook at my docket those 2 times a year. But it doesn't mean that I don't get requests a lot via email or phone in between as well.
Yeah. And just to add on to what Seema was saying, I was talking about taking on larger issues. We do a lot of smaller issues because one of the big benefits of CLA is our volunteer attorney network. So that's about 150 plus growing every day attorneys throughout the watershed in every single state that pick up issues. And it's completely volunteer. There's no required hours to be in our network. And so the smaller cases or a research assignment or a comment letter are a lot of times easier for them to pick up while they're doing their full-time job as an attorney as well.
Excellent, thanks. I'm going to turn now. Maria had some questions that she posted in the chat. Maria, do you want to ask these in person live, or do you want me to read them off? And I'm picking on you because we're friends.
It's a small enough group.
But barring a response, I'll go ahead and read them.
I can see it as well. I read it about asking about land use and local zoning issues in West Virginia. CLA has a small amount of attorneys in West Virginia, but we certainly, that is something we could send out to them directly to reach out to them. And if they can't help, they've also been really helpful at connecting us with other attorneys they know, since West Virginia is really like a who you know kind of area.
Hmm.
Yep, and from my end, Maria, if I got that question, I would likely, this is one of those where I would probably turn to Hannah's group because she has a network that extends into West Virginia and Pennsylvania. I tend to focus more in Maryland on my zoning cases in particular, in part because I'm barred in Maryland. My students are under the student practice rule here in Maryland. We have certainly worked to co-counsel matters with an attorney. Say if Hannah found somebody in West Virginia, right, but didn't want to go at it alone to work on a zoning issue, that is certainly something my clinic could co-counsel and help. That way, I think a lot of private practice lawyers or other lawyers that might not be able to take on an entire zoning case do get help on drafting, on research, on things that are essential for a particular case. And so we do co-counsel with attorneys that are barred in other states nearby, particularly as you described, when the impact is certainly felt here in our communities. So yeah.
Seema, do you know if West Virginia has an their law school has an environmental law clinic?
They don't, and that's another thing I should mention is that we do have several environmental law clinics in the Mid-Atlantic area. There's not one in West Virginia, but certainly in DC, UVA, down in Richmond, and also up in Delaware and Pennsylvania. There are a couple of environmental law clinics. And so we actually do work together and refer matters to each other a decent amount. And that's not even only in the Mid-Atlantic, okay? I had an environmental justice community call me. They were up in Syracuse, New York, okay? They heard me speak at a conference, happened to be there. It was a conference associated with the ACLU, and I was on a panel, came to speak to me, and I referred them to University of Buffalo's environmental law clinic to work on. So we are the clinics, environmental law clinics, there's about 40 or so in the country, and we do refer to each other. We co-counsel things with each other a lot. And sometimes you have clinics that work in states because they're barred in multiple states. You know, I take on matters in DC, I take on matters in Maryland, and sometimes you find that with other clinics as well. So, you know, it's very possible that somebody at a clinic in Pennsylvania or Virginia, right, does have connections in West Virginia that could take on this particular zoning matter. So it's good to just call myself or Hannah because we can usually find a connection for you. If it's not something that our offices can take on, either we don't have the time or we don't have the resources at that moment, or we don't have the capacity in another way because it's in another state, we usually have connections with other groups that can.
Thanks, that's helpful. Yeah, I work for a nonprofit who is obviously engaged in communities all the time. I call us the local boots on the ground, but we don't have the legal resources. We do not do the legal sources with them. So often, like, we help prepare technical comments, things like that. And I do have relationships with, I'm sure you know, probably Ken Crystal from Widener Law Clinic, who
Yep.
I keep busy full time, all the time. I have multiple states. He's doing a lot of work for me right now, as a matter of fact, in Pennsylvania, not for me, but for my communities in Pennsylvania and Delaware. Got a lot of appeals and different things going on. But this was a new one out in West Virginia, and it's a huge project. We've seen, and Hannah will be familiar with it, it's the expansion that we have going on in Maryland on the Eastern Shore with the mega farm projects. We thought they were big at 600-foot barns and 650-foot barns and 12 barns. Here we're talking about 704-foot barns, 70,000 birds per barn, 6 rotations per year, 20 at one site, partnered with an equity investment firm, is the applicant. Found out 2 miles away, there's 15 more, same applicants. All of Manure is going to be relocated. God only knows where, but we found some snags that this should have never been zoned in the way approved. Did not go through a public process. And while I'm talking to some of the water keepers and some other folks on some of the federal issues with the NIPT's permitting, there is a strong need right now because they're looking to redo the zoning. So I might pick up the phone and call rather than take up all the time on here, but it's really important. It's going to have implications, I think, for the entire region.
Yeah, please reach out. And then the other thing is that I think both Seema and CLA do is we don't just talk to other lawyers. We're not just talking to other law clinics. We're also talking to the river keepers in the area, the watershed organizations, the community organizations. So, you know, just using this as an example, one of the first people I would reach out to is West Virginia Rivers and see, you know, what are you guys doing about this? Have you heard about this? What's going on? Or things like that, if the client hasn't already done that. But those are, we try to keep community level. I live in DC, CLA is located in Annapolis. I'm not on the ground everywhere and I don't know what's going on. And so I really want to work with the communities who are on the ground to better understand the issues rather than just come in and help out.
Right. Well, thank you. That is helpful.
Great. Other questions from people or just comments or thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Maria. Other audience members on the call, specific environmental justice issues in your communities or that you're aware of, now's the time for, because I mean, our lab, I can ask you guys about anything.
We also have, I'll say, multiple situations. You know, I think Hannah did a great job talking about the community legal education she does. Our clinic does quite a bit of community education as well. And what often happens is that after a community education program that calls for specific legal help on a specific issue come in even more at that point. And so I think for community groups often and individuals as well, education programs are a wonderful place to start, particularly if they happen to know what issue they're working on, right? If it's multiple issues and they're trying to go at multiple things at one time, you know, community education isn't always the best tool. But if they know for sure that they have, you know, a zoning issue or they're trying to participate in an environmental review process under NEPA, for example, or they want to deal with a permit of some kind, then a community education webinar is often a really good place to start as well.
Yeah, I agree. And that's another intake we do, is if there is a certain issue that you want to figure out how to educate your community on, that would be something that CLA would take on and do the research, put the presentation, PowerPoint, or even a little fact sheet together to share with your community to help you move forward in those advocacy steps. Because sometimes the strongest argument per se is the argument you have as community members to your policymakers. And so that's kind of how the groundwater guide that I showed you earlier, that's how that got started. Was someone saw a groundwater pollution issue, they wanted to know the next advocacy steps they could take. And so we made a guide, and then we developed it specifically for them, but turned it into something that can be used throughout the state of Maryland.
Thanks. There's another question in the chat here. Johanna Adashek asks, have you noticed an apprehension from clients towards working with law students as compared to attorneys?
What do you think, Hannah?
I don't know. I think there definitely is some sometimes, but we had the best students, interns this summer. So they like blew our clients out of the water. Like, they were so impressed. They got permits denied with their comment letters. Law students are good. Like, they are trained, and they're sometimes closer to the research strategies than attorneys who have moved more into the actual application. So I think it's just as great.
I really notice in my clinic, the way my clinic works, I think I described it a little earlier, is that I have students in August, and they're with me till roughly April, May. And then I have some students, as I described, who are gluttons for punishment and come back for a whole nother year to work in the clinic. And so they might be a second year, a law student, and they are, starting the clinic, and they go through the entire year-long process, and they love it, and come back during their last year of law school. And that last year of law school, when they come back, is what I call a Clinic 2 student. So it's their second full year in the clinic. They're essentially attorneys at that point. They really are, and I don't see a large distinction, particularly with my second year clinic students who've come back, between them and really a first or a second year lawyer. I don't see that much difference. And in fact, sometimes even better. Sometimes first or second year lawyers who haven't had a sort of experience that they get in my clinic, right? They've been sitting in a classroom for 3 years, and they didn't do a clinic. And so they're kind of off just brand new learning. But the ones that take clinic, particularly if they do it for 2 years, I mean, my goodness, the experience they get is, might as well be an attorney at that point. And I really let them do a lot of the legal work on their own. And they're really able to serve clients extremely well on a multitude of issues. One of the things that can be a struggle for attorneys that are trying to work a full-time job, but then take on a pro bono case on the side, is that they're busy. They're really busy. They're running a full legal office sometimes, right? And they've got a lot going on in their own practice, and the pro bono case they've taken on is definitely on the side, and they're not always able to provide a full legal service. They may be able to help with one hearing, on a case, or one permit comment, but those holistic legal services that take a lot of time and sometimes take years, right? They're not always able to do because they're working a full-time job, right? And so
I would say even you and I as attorneys helping out interns, or for you students, we have multiple cases. So we aren't even fully committed, but we have students working on one case at a time. Yep. And so they are fully committed. They understand it, front to back, which is really something you won't usually get, even for paid legal help.
Yep. I think that's right. And my Clinic 2 students who come back and work with the same community groups a whole second year, I mean, it's really tremendous what they can achieve at that point. It's a great question.
Yeah, absolutely. Pushing along, can either of you speak to some specific success stories, or specific kind of cases that that give more of a detail on what comes across your desk?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first again, just to stick with the pattern. One that I really enjoyed working on was a comment letter on the solar field in Charles County that was going to clear 240 acres of trees. And so, although my job at CLA is mostly to do the intake and the client counseling and determining placement with attorneys and at CLA, this one I just felt a connection to. I felt like I had to work on it. And so I took it on and wrote the comment letter. And it was really great. We worked with Audubon Naturalist Society, and we were able to take on the brunt of the comment letter writing and making the comment letter legally challengeable, making sure everything was included for the legal challenge, while they were able to do the on-the-ground advocacy, which I think in the end is the reason that the permit got denied for these solar panels, was because they were on the ground meeting with the Piscataway tribal members. They were on the ground meeting with Georgetown students. They were visiting the site and taking pictures. They were able to do that on the ground work while we just did the writing and the not as fun stuff for them. And so it was really neat to see those two sides come together. And because they were able to put more time and effort into the advocacy, they got their name heard. They got on the secretary's desk to have that permit reviewed. And I thought it was really neat to be able to champion them in their work on the ground and take a burden off of them, but be able to work together at the same time.
I would say my biggest success stories, Jan, are twofold. My biggest success stories are when I hear, and it's not even what I hear, it's really what I see happening for individuals that come together as a community group at the get-go. What I often see are folks that are a very loose community group, right? They, are a group of neighbors largely who are tired, and they're tired because they've got some sort of issue in their neighborhood that they are tired of fighting. And they've tried multiple routes often, right? They've called their political representatives, and they're not sure that there's anything they can do about a particular facility that's been in their neighborhood for a while, or a particular project that is brand new and coming. It's, a road or a rail. And they're concerned. They're concerned about the safety of their home. They're concerned about their property. They're concerned about pollution exposure. They're concerned that about space, right? A lot of, particularly in urban areas, they're concerned that a community park or a community center is going to be taken away from them, and that is a resource that they use. They're concerned about a historic cemetery that might be in their neighborhood, or a historic building that might be in their neighborhood, right? And so I think what I find is the biggest success is that we connect them with our students who are working extremely hard, right, to find a way to make it better. Okay. And just that connection to me is the success, right? Where we've got students that are engaged in critical thinking and analyzing and working with folks, right? It's not so much that we are the experts in coming to you. Often we get tremendous ideas from the communities themselves. So to me, the biggest success is the people-to-people connection that happens when you're talking to people over and over and over again, and you're meeting them with them every week or every 2 weeks, right? Either in person or these days on Zoom, and then you establish relationships, you get to know each other's families. And sometimes the students that I have are coming from a completely different place. They're, coming from different communities, different areas. They might be different ages. They might be different genders than the client groups. And so having folks connect that otherwise wouldn't connect, right, to understand issues and problem solve together, to me is the biggest success. It's the biggest success for those communities. It's also the biggest success for the students, because I hear, right, from alum who have done clinics, right, and go off to be lawyers, that the mission of environmental justice that they learn, right, and the understanding and empathy and critical thinking and problem solving and all of that that goes into meeting with community groups and individuals, they take that with them in their real jobs later for their entire career. So to me, that is the hugest success, is it's not just the 1 year or 2 years that they might be working on a zoning case, and you might win that zoning case or you might lose that zoning case. It is definitely, to me, the bigger success is the connection between those people and the long lasting impact of that connection.
Yeah, I would echo that too. It's really awesome because we are able to have these connections with all these different groups, especially through working with Choose Clean Water Coalition, which I know Seema has also worked with before. It's great to be able to connect these two communities that might be right there next to each other and just haven't overlapped yet in conversations. And when they do, they shine. They really do. They can really work together and get work done. It's really neat.
Excellent. That's one of the kind of avowed purposes of this symposium, is to bring different community members together so they can hear from folks like you, but also hear from each other, and kind of have that peer mentorship. And you know, even if it's a group in Uniontown, Alabama, dealing with a landfill, there's landfill issues here in Prince George's County, and you know, so being able to kind of get those synergies going is incredibly powerful.
And just to say a little bit more, so as you all know, I am newer to this. I joined CLA in January 2019, and I came from MDE. And one of the things I saw most was this didn't happen at MDE. They're not in the communities. Even if they have a community meeting, they're not there, and they're not having that connection. And that's what I miss most as a, you know, communicative. I like meeting people. I like talking to people kind of person. I didn't get to do that at MDE. And so that's one of the things that we're really trying to encourage. CLA has partnered with Dr. Secoby Wilson and Assateague Coastal Trust and other organizations throughout the Eastern Shore and Maryland to help get MDE to reinvigorate their Environmental Justice Commission. And whatever the end is, but the important part is Environmental Justice Commission to increase this community engagement at MDE and at state agencies. They should be here these weekends. They should be at these Saturday sessions and attending them and meeting the people they serve. And if they're not there, then how are they going to fully become an organization or an administration that represents the state of Maryland and the communities who are suffering most?
Absolutely. Secretary Grumbles was on our report back panel earlier this morning, but yeah, it's not just the report back, it's being there at every stage, you know, listening to the conversations along the way. So
yeah,
absolutely.
I've seen some state employees on some of the Choose Clean Water Coalition calls. And so I've been impressed to see that. But yeah, I'm hoping that as we work with MDE more to re-engage the Environmental Justice Commission, we'll see more of this.
Awesome. I'm going to check the chat again to see, oh, sorry, if there are any questions. Let's see, I saw something pop up. Oh, Maria agrees. Yeah, so just a quick pause, you know, for anyone in the audience to shout out, you know, any community issues that they might be aware of or dealing with themselves personally, and want some advice from either of our panelists here. And while that, I'm adding people from the wait list.
I'll share my screen again. I have a permit flyer that, you know, it's not the best. I will say we're working to remove some of the legalese from it, but it is one of our points of this that we're trying to get out is that this industrial stormwater permit will have implications in your community, and how can you be engaged, and how can CLA help you be engaged. And I'm sure we'll end up working with Seema on some of this as well, because she faces a lot of it in her direct community in Baltimore and the school's direct community. So, you know, I'll just leave this up here for a little bit, and I can send it out to people as well. But just to remember that this is, you know, these permits last for 5 years, and the industrial sites that are held to these permits have to listen to you during this permitting process. You have a voice in what they are required to, the standards they are held to in the permit, and your voice should be heard.
And speaking of stormwater in Baltimore, are either of you engaged in any of the work going on with the sewer backups and CSO or SSO issues in the city?
Anna, you guys have a group working on that, or some maybe pro bono lawyers that are helping on that, I think.
Yep, we have some pro bono lawyers that are working with Blue Water Baltimore, but we're not directly engaged.
Gotcha.
I will also sort of shout out to folks to, if you're interested at all in NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. That is the large federal statute that requires that any time the federal government gives funding for a major infrastructure project, regardless of where it is, there needs to be an environmental review process that takes place, and communities and individuals and organizations are allowed to participate and give comments. I am seeing a tremendous number of requests from individuals and community groups very concerned about being able to participate in NEPA processes. It's so much so that my clinic students did a community education webinar just earlier this week on NEPA and NEPA commenting. I believe there were close to 70 people that attended that community education webinar on NEPA. And that is, we do have that available in recorded form with slides. Happy to get that out. I am also going to be talking a little bit more about NEPA and environmental justice in particular on the NEPA panel that's next Saturday as a part of this EJ symposium. So anyone that's on this call that is particularly interested in large infrastructure projects and the impact on local communities, feel free to attend the NEPA panel. There is a lot going on right now on NEPA and stripping away the public's ability to participate. And it is definitely a concern. And I think a lot of people sometimes think, oh, that might be something that's happening in DC, but really that federal law and federal regulation has huge impacts on local communities and what's going on in this area. And so I would encourage folks to if you're interested in that area, to come to the NEPA panel next Saturday.
And if you're not interested, get interested.
There you go.
Go to the panel.
Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's one of the great things about these panels that you've been hosting with NEPA is it's big, it's scary, and there's a lot to it, but it's also a really awesome place where you can be a part of the permitting process.
Absolutely.
Even your simple comments, if you submit a paragraph comment, they have to read and respond in some way. So you will get answered.
Yeah, and just a quick tangent. So we do have the NEPA conversation coming up next week. We also have a panel on rollbacks, these federal rollbacks and these executive orders that have been ongoing over the last 4 years that have weakened NEPA and weakened the Clean Air Act and weakened, you know, all these other landmark legislations, which many of which are turning 50 this year. And so definitely also check out that panel as well. If for those people who are attending this session, if you're interested in these legal matters, these legal issues, check out both the 50 years of NEPA panel and the Trump rollbacks, which I believe has a different title, a more PC title, hashtag Trump rollbacks.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions about, you know, maybe not a direct issue they're facing right now, but just curiosity about different environmental issues that you've seen your community face in the past?
I have one question with regard to COVID. And with regard to COVID and essential workers. So we've seen, well, things have changed very recently, but throughout the pandemic, we've seen kind of an uptick, especially initially on, where a lot of municipalities were seeing this as an opportunity to catch up on backlogs for infrastructure projects and stuff like that. And so do those sorts of issues kind of come across your desks as with regard to environmental policy, dealing with the specific kind of worker issues, or is it more so, would that go into another realm of policy?
So I would typically probably refer a worker specific matter to a clinic that maybe works on employment or worker safety issues. And so that's why the beginning I was describing how our clinical law program works more broadly. You know, for sometimes for communities that contact me, in their issues that they're dealing with are environmental and a whole host of other things, okay? And that's part of the reason why we take the approach we do, is to look at the issues that communities are facing holistically, talk about them for a very long period of time, and then carve out what my clinic can do. But I don't sort of ever want to leave people hanging, right? If there are issues that are tax related, issues that are worker or employment or safety related, that I think another clinic at the law school could help with, right? I've co-counseled with another clinic at my own law school, which is really just another professor that sits down the hall from me, right? So that can come into play a lot, and that's where we see connections being made across the field of law. Because part of the problem, right, with environmental law is that it is, and law in general is really segmented, right? We live in these silos, and we talk about water under the Clean Water Act, and we talk about air, clean air, right? And we talk about things in very separate pieces. That's just within the field of environmental law. And I think law as a whole does that, right? This is a tax issue, this is an employment or worker issue, and this is something else. And so one of the things that we really work on in the clinic is for students to be able to sort through a whole variety of issues. There might be a legal issue that is not under the Clean Water Act, but the case is actually in zoning, or the case is actually in a breach of contract, or the case is actually in tort. And it's a totally different kind of legal action that's not under one of our environmental laws, but it still is an environmental issue. And so sometimes these overlapping issues lend itself to referrals to other clinics that have a particular narrow area of expertise, or sometimes my clinic just needs to step outside of the box of working under a federal environmental law or a state environmental law and take a torts case, or take a breach of contract case, or take, you know, a very different kind of case, right? So that I do think is part of the analysis that we're doing all the time when we're working with individuals and communities.
Yeah, I would say you're never going to get a no from CLA. One of the best things about working with Chesapeake Legal Alliance, and I assume Seema as well and her clinic, is we have a passion for what we're doing. And we have, you know, empathy for all the cases that are going alongside of things. So farm worker issues, employment issues, anything that is not directly in our wheelhouse, we're going to find a way to help in some other capacity, either sending you different resources, making a connection to someone else, sending you a list of all these different links that will hopefully lead you somewhere. It's never going to be just a no. It's going to be, you know, we can't do this, but here's what we can do. And if this doesn't work, please come back to us. Let's rethink it. Because we understand the difficulty it is to find free legal assistance, free policy, just free assistance in general.
Absolutely. Thanks.
I know Seema was talking a little bit about technical support, and that's been a huge issue throughout the watershed, and I'm assuming throughout the nation as well, is free technical assistance. They are much more likely to, get paid out by different firms or land use companies in the area. And so finding technical assistance is just very difficult. One thing CLA is working to start developing is a technical assistance network that's similar to our attorney network. So it will be more flexible. It won't necessarily all be free pro bono services. Some might be low bono in our network, or some might be full bono, but their full bono price is a lot more reasonable. And they only help directly on environmental issues on the good side and not the bad side. So you still feel like you're working with a good person. So we're working to develop that. And if anyone has any suggestions, we'd be happy to take them and hear more about it. But that will hopefully be able to provide more services to the communities throughout the watershed, specifically for us, in getting to sometimes the litigation step is having that technical knowledge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. For example, at Jan Michael, as you know, right, we use the School of Public Health as technical experts. Jacoby Wilson has been an expert for us in our cases. Jan Michael has shown my students how to work various tools that help our students think about the usefulness of those tools in regulatory or permit or policy or legal matters, right? Which we're back at it again this year, Jan Michael, so I'm going to bring you back to my class, just so you know. But no, there really is, I think, a need for legal assistance and technical assistance to come together much more to serve community groups. The clinics as a whole in the country have been doing this for some time, and I think that work is picking up even more. Some of the best experts I have found have been actually referrals from clinics out in California or Atlanta and all kinds of other places. Yeah. So
we've heard a lot about West Coast assistance.
Absolutely, and I do think that folks that have technical expertise in a wide variety of areas also want to help, right? They're really interested in thinking through the way that particular tools, whether they are, pollution-oriented tools, mapping tools, any kind of
drones.
Right, absolutely, can be hugely helpful and applicable, right? And so, I often talk to grad students or faculty who say, gosh, I'm writing a grant for X, Y, or Z, and it'd be great to have a section on where this could be applied, right? And so I'm often giving suggestions to technical folks on where their research, right, could be applied. And so I do work with a lot of other departments within the university system, School of Nursing. I mentioned at the very beginning that my clinic does quite a bit of legal support work for communities in developing countries, okay? And we've been doing that via Zoom for a while, and it's just increased right now because everyone has Zoom capabilities, right? So we'll talk with communities in developing countries throughout much of West Africa, South Africa, Eastern Europe, and we're helping on a coal ash issue abroad right now because we have some expertise in coal ash and we see it here. And the same assistance that we can provide on a legal basis to a group abroad, right, can be great for technical folks here that have experience in coal ash to also help, right? Some of these issues are international, right? We're connected in multiple ways across jurisdictional boundaries. And so that technical assistance and legal assistance, I think, can really cross over those boundaries in really interesting ways, right? What I find is really interesting, this idea that we started off a first question from Maria about an issue in West Virginia and how that impacts several of us here in Maryland because it's the greater watershed, right? But we have issues that are coming from way abroad, much further than West Virginia, that impact us as well, right? And we do things in our area that impact other people, right? We live in a very interconnected world. And so I do think that, you know, helping groups that are in other countries fight a coal plant, right? And fight a coal plant tooth and nail has a huge impact for us because it is so directly related to climate change, right? And so that is why my clinic does a lot of international work as well to support communities abroad, because there is shared learning. There is a lot of environmental justice issues that cross over, and we see a lot of commonality. And I think it is, you know, great to get that technical assistance help on any number of matters that we're working on. So those of you that do have expertise in that area and are trying to figure out how to get involved in this movement, there is a place for you too.
Yeah, what a great opportunity for your students, Seema. That's really awesome. And I think it highlights all the ability, you know, one of the small benefits of the pandemic is I think it has really increased communication to community levels. You're talking about, you know, communicating with people in Africa, but even for CLA, it's just communicating with Maria on the Eastern Shore better and feeling like, you know, using Zoom. CLA now has a Zoom account. We bought one because we realized that this video capacity is really helpful when you're speaking with community members and you're getting to know people. We have so much from our facial expressions and how we go about talking with someone that it's really important to have these video connections, and we hope to carry that in post-pandemic, is to continue having these technological connections that we've been kind of forced to adopt.
Absolutely. One last question. Our conversation just a moment ago about technical assistance reminded me of a case, well, not a legal case, but a kind of a case that we're working with in Savannah regarding some of their port-related impacts. So, you know, they have some refineries and shipping emissions and stuff like that, and trying to build a Title VI administrative complaint case against the state of Georgia and against, you know, the polluting impacts there. Documentation, that the importance of communities being able to document their experiences and document what's happening, you know, with the agencies and with the state and that. So what kind of tools or resources or best practices do you guys have to kind of speak on for a community that's fed up, and they're now realize that, you know, they want to get something going, but they also realize they don't have the documentation, they don't have the records. What happens from there, or what can you say to community members to help them prepare and or places they can find documentation and stuff like that?
Do you want to talk to this, Seema?
Sure.
I would always say photos. I take photos everywhere I go on my phone of, like, even if it's just like one residential house in my community that I see leaking soil into the road, I just take a picture of it because I never know if it's maybe it'll be a bigger problem and I can use it, but I can't speak as much to after the fact. So maybe you can speak to that more.
Yeah, so I do think that we often, I think in a legal capacity, often come in too late, okay? And we often come in too late. And I think that's one of the benefits of programs that we conduct, or Hannah conducts, on community education. Because community education can often be somewhat preventative and can somewhat help people think about what might be coming. Because often when I get a call from somebody, it is way too late. And I am often telling folks, right, let's think about the next time this permit comes up, right? And we can challenge at that time, right? Or the next time that the zoning council is going to redo zones in this area, let's talk about at that point. And so I often find, right, that I am pushing it down because I didn't get the call early enough, okay? So we do have a timing issue on a lot of different things that are related to environmental law and actually documenting, right? I think that's true also for studies. Okay, I do think that there needs to be a better understanding of what kind of studies, right, lawyers typically need to rely on. Okay, and I think that there is more emphasis on this, right? How good does the study need to be? What does the study need to be on, right? There's a lot of emphasis right now on citizen science tools. What citizen science tools are useful for? What are they not useful for? How, you know, where people get hung up on relying too much on citizen science tools or not know how to use them properly, and then they're just
The QA/QC.
yes,
Yeah.
a QA/QC issue, right? So all of those things are really, really difficult to sort through. I do think there is a really large push, right, on documenting, and I think citizen science tools, whether they're apps, whether they're monitors, whether they're recording devices, right? All kinds of things fall under that gambit of citizen science, which you're seeing, right, really come to the forefront, okay? My clinic has been working on it. We're working on it this year. I think a lot of clinics are. What we need to do as a community of environmental justice advocates, I think, is keep trying different citizen science tools, get into a permit comment, see what happens, right? Get it into a regulatory hearing, see what happens, use it, and then advertise the fact that you tried to use this particular app or this particular monitoring device and the success you had and share that success, right? This forced an agency to go out and do an inspection, right? Great, that is a success. That is a result, right? And so I do think there needs to be a lot more dialogue on how to record, what tools are out there to record, right? Where you can use those tools and where they are successful and for what. Because sometimes we say, at least in the legal field, not useful because they aren't evidence of X, Y, or Z, right? And we hold them to this really high standard thinking about a court and a trial and as real evidence that needs to be admitted, but there's so much that happens way before that, right? That I often term as being influential. Might not be evidence, right, that you need to prove this happened and this is the result, but they can certainly be influential and influential in lots of different ways. And so I do think we are in a really interesting time to explore exactly that issue on documentation, Jan, and push it forward.
Yeah, and I would echo that as well. As also, I think drones are this new item that's going to really improve a lot of what we're doing, but I think we need to start using them more in order to make them reliable, because people are, well, it's too far away, you can't fully see, you can't zoom in enough, things like that. But I think increasing the use of drone footage will encourage more usage and more acceptability of it. Another thing is legislative pushes. Seema talked about earlier the different branches of government where we can work. And so if you can get, a legislative push for different acceptabilities of science and citizen science, and encouraging citizen science or recognizing it, or commissions who evaluate citizen science or things like that. I'm kind of brainstorming right now with that kind of stuff, but the legislative ability is powerful. As well, one thing I am trying out that is a new thing I'm thinking about is in the commissions that I spoke about earlier, the Environmental Justice Commission and the Climate Change Commission in Maryland. The Climate Change Commission puts out recommendations every year to the legislature and state agencies. And the Environmental Justice Commission will now be required to do the same, even though they were required before. They'll now actually be doing it. And I think you know, having it in writing from a commission that is commissioned by the legislature might be an interesting way to then cite to it in permitting requests and permit challenges, permit comments and things like that, to say, well, you know, the commission recommended you did this and you didn't do it. So being active, and, you know, as we're closing out today and thinking about what you can do after this and how you can stay participating in pro bono and figuring out what you're doing next, I would encourage everyone to participate at these commission meetings. They have a public comment at every meeting, and you are able to say what you would like these commissions to be doing. The Environmental Justice Commission is rejuvenating itself and will have seats open for community members to participate. And you have, once you're a seat and a voting member on that commission, you have the ability to make these recommendations to our agencies and our legislature about what they should be doing to protect your communities. You have a strong point there. So I really encourage you to be active in these frustrating processes, even though they're frustrating, if you have the time. CLA would always be there to support you and to provide research and help, of course, and always. But you are the power as a community member.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Hannah and Seema, both. It is now almost a little bit past 10 to the hour. We will be having closing remarks back in the original main room. And I put the link for the attendee toolkit in that in the chat box here. And in that toolkit, you can see the program. Today's program. We'll be uploading it weekly with relevant, you know, for next week's information. It will be up there probably by Wednesday of next week. And any resources shared in this session, as well as the recordings, will also be posted to that packet and then posted to our website as well. But one last time, I definitely want to thank you both for the work that you do and for taking time to provide this session. Audience members, attendees, please check out the websites, or, you know, contact both Hannah and Seema, if not for yourselves or for environmental issues that you are facing personally, but share it with your networks so that you can get the word out. Because again, these are services that are waiting to be, well, obviously not waiting. You guys have your work ahead of you and a full task load, but these are services that are there and they're free for community members to seek justice. So thank you. I'll do the applause.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and look forward to hearing from anyone that is looking for help. We're here, as Jan said, and thank you to Jan for coordinating.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to save the chat.